You had a disappointment last year. You wanted it last year. You didn't quite get it. It was taken from you, maybe earnedly so, but your time came now. Was there a goal all the way along there? You were there last year when the boys were in Madison, and that had to be an inspiration for this year.
And we decided that we were going there. All summer we worked together. All we wanted.
Madison on Wednesday, maybe Tuesday. Is it Wednesday?
It's on Wednesday.
And that old time feeling comes and goes in the rain, like an old man with his checkers.
It was interesting when it first came out that this team was going to go in the Hall of Fame. A few of us emailed back and forth, and hopefully Renee Rude's okay with this, but she sent us all kind of an email of her thoughts and memories of the experience, and she just said it was just a family, and it was being from a small town, we played for each other, we played for this school, we played for this town and community, and it was much more than individuals, and but we all had to come together, and everyone had a role, everyone played a part, and that was what was special about this team.
Limbs through the night on a crutch, like an old soldier wondering.
Title IX is directly responsible for the growth of girls' high school athletics in our country, and without it, the 1988 girls' state basketball team may have not had the opportunity to gain Hall of Fame status. Prior to Title IX, girls in the Elk Mound District participated in club activities through the Girls Athletic Association. In GAA, club teams played contests against other schools in the conference. The resources devoted to girls' sports were significantly less than those devoted to their male counterparts. The governing board of athletics in the state did not extend to girls' club sports. Therefore, there was no state playoffs held for girls prior to Title IX. In 1976, 4 years after Title IX was enacted, the first WIAA Girls Basketball Championships were held in Madison. A year later, Elk Mound started a WIAA-affiliated basketball program for girls. Under the guidance of Coach Kezabuski, 3 memorable events happened during that inaugural season. The team was the first to win a varsity-level game in the newly constructed gym. Teresa Johnson became the first Elk Mound player to earn all-conference recognition, being named honorable mention. And the team was forced to stay overnight in the Spring Valley City Hall due to a blizzard which made travel nearly impossible. Still in its infancy, the program would struggle to gain traction for the next half-decade. A series of coaches and no consistent feeder program hindered the growth.
Early on, they just weren't competitive. Hadn't played enough basketball. And there was, as there still is today, but there was a huge disparity in talent.
In 1983, with the hiring of Ted Heinstead to coach the team, things began to change. Heinsted's no-excuses approach was at the root of his philosophy that promoted accountability, selflessness, and teamwork.
You knew you were in trouble, though, when he'd look at you and his hand would shake and that finger would be down and he'd be in your face like this. Then you knew you were in trouble, and every one of us knew that. That was his signature right here.
With a talented group of players entering high school in 1984, the fortune of the Lady Mounders began to change.
The biggest thing was when Ted took over is that there was more commitment to success. And that's hard, and that's nobody else's fault early on. It's hard to do when you're just, not as good as people, But there was no comparison 2 years in to Ted's program than 2 years back.
The success of the 1988 state basketball team was forged from the disappointing endings to the 1986 and 87 campaigns. In 1986, the developing Mounder program had a breakout season come to an abrupt end in the regional final. The game was a foreshadowing of the next 2 seasons, as the Mounders lost that night to a highly skilled and undefeated Prentice team at Cornell. A 73-39 defeat at the hands of the Buccaneers was a reminder to the players that there was still much work to be done to compete with the heavyweight programs in the region. During the 1987 season, the Mounders won 19 games, a program record at the time, but they were unable to finish ahead of rival Spring Valley in the conference standings, losing both times to their DSC foe. Nevertheless, they were playing their best basketball and riding a 12-game winning streak when they had a much-anticipated rematch with Prentice in the Gilman Regional Final. The team had grown considerably in skill and confidence from the previous season, but were unable to overcome the Buccaneer mystique, losing 59-47, despite a 31-point, 16-rebound performance by Colleen Heimstead.
Prentice, the big thing about the Prentice, the journey with Prentice, when we played them the first time in the playoffs, and we had just virtually no chance of beating them, and we knew it. And you don't tell the players that, but they could play mediocre and they were going to beat us solid. The second time we played them, I thought that we had a chance to beat them, but they were favorites, prohibitive favorites. And the third time we played them, we expected to win.
The loss to Prentice, though tough to stomach, once again gave the young Elk Mound squad a taste of what it takes to compete in a hostile environment against a top-flight team. The Buccaneers held a 15-rebound advantage in the game, and Elk Mound shot an uncharacteristic 7 for 17 from the line. It was not new to the players that rebounding and free throw shooting often determine outcomes of games, especially in the playoffs. Just as iron sharpens iron, Coach Heimstead and his crew realized the importance of the 86 and 87 Prentice games in preparing them for the next season. With the core of the team intact for the 88 campaign, the team left Gilman that evening feeling disappointed, but wrapped within the sting of the loss was a quiet confidence. They had closed the gap on the Buccaneers and were ready to disprove the sentiments of Prentice coach Joe Foytek, who in a post-game interview with the Phillips newspaper reporter stated that Colleen Heimstead is a fine player, but they don't have a whole lot to go with her. Prentice would go on to make the state tournament, falling to Marathon in overtime. No longer flying under the radar, the Mounders entered the 1988 season with a bullseye on their back. Favored to win the conference and to make a deep run in the playoffs, the team needed to remain focused to achieve their goals. The Mounders navigated through the conference schedule without a loss until they met rival Spring Valley in the last game of the season. Elk Mound had defeated Valley earlier in the year, but knew from the previous encounters with the Cardinals that they would be prepared to play under the guidance of Coach Herm Schliep. The Mounders held a narrow 1-point lead after the first quarter, but Spring Valley took control in the second stanza. According to the Dunn County News, it was a disastrous second quarter that dealt the Mounders the death blow they couldn't recover from. Forcing 12 Mounder turnovers and outscoring Elk Mound 21-10 in the period, the Cardinals held a 10-point halftime lead. Elk Mound put up 40 second-half points in a valiant attempt to erase Valley's lead, but the host team knocked down 13-16 free throws in the final 6 minutes and won 32 of 37 from the stripe for the game to pull even in the conference standings. Elk Mound's first outright conference championship would have to wait until another year. Winning the program's first championship, but having to share it with their rivals, was bittersweet. Nevertheless, the team could not dwell on one bad quarter of one regular season game. The playoffs were starting the following week, and Coach Heimstead had to make sure his team had a short memory.
What I really remember about that game was we were more worried about, you want to win every game, but we were more worried about when we were going to see them again than we were that game. There was a lot more to lose in 2 weeks than there was that night.
The disappointment of losing to Spring Valley seemed to carry over into the first round of the playoffs. Playing against Weyerhaeuser, a team with a 10-9 record, the Mounders stumbled out of the gates. For the second game in a row, a poor second quarter ended with a 22-19 Weyerhaeuser lead.
It was just empty and just maybe dark and just unmotivating, but you have to find a way to win.
It was a perfect storm. It started right away. I always tried to time when we got to a place. And we got a slow bus driver. And I was going berserk because we were going to be late getting there. We get there, and the gym was the cafeteria. The tile floor was slippery as the very devil. Weyerhaeuser came out just really super aggressive. And we didn't respond to that. Make a long story short, I benched the whole starting five in the second quarter. But came back, and we didn't, I don't know that we ever really played well, but we matched their aggressiveness and pulled it out.
Coach Heimstad's come-to-Jesus speech at halftime was effective. The Mounders outscored their opponents 23-5 in the third quarter and rolled to a 57-39 win, setting up a date with conference foe Colfax in the regional semifinal. Led by the offensive firepower of Colleen Heimstad and Renee Rude, the Mounders shook off their recent second quarter blues and bolted to an 11-point halftime lead on the Vikings. The Mounder duo scored 39 of the team's 51 points as Elk Mound coasted to a 12-point win. With the victory secured, the Mounders switched their focus toward a highly anticipated matchup with Prentice in the regional final.
It all came down to Prentice. I mean, who's kidding over here? We had gotten beat by them 35, I think, the first time, and the year before we got beat by 12, and we knew what was coming.
Prior to seeding the basketball playoffs, it was not uncommon for two of the top teams in the bracket to meet prior to sectional play. The 1988 Elk Mound Prentice WIAA Regional Final was a perfect example of this scenario. The last AP state rankings of the regular season had Prentice ranked as the #1 Class C team in the state, while the Mounders, despite their late season loss to Spring Valley, held down the #2 spot.
We went over to Marathon and watched Prentice play Marathon. Marathon was really good that year too. And I took most of the kids over, and I wanted them to see that these kids were beatable. I mean, they were a very good team, Prentice was, but they weren't super. Mr. Foytak helped us out. We got there, there weren't many people there. We got there, and we went up in the stands, and I think I went to get some popcorn or something. Well, I no more left, and Joe came up there. He was talking to the kids, and I found out later what he said. He was talking to them about what a shame it was that we were going to end up playing at Prentice because they'd won 96 games in a row or whatever.
I think when Coach Foytak came up, I don't remember exactly what he said, but it kind of made us angry, I think, and maybe a little bit more determined. But I think Sue Plash was fuming, Linda Karlstrom probably was fuming, Renee Rude, I'm sure, was ready to knock his block off. But I don't know, I think my dad knew what he said, I can't remember what he said, but it was one of those kind of moments where, okay, you're all right, you can keep thinking that you're just going to roll over us, and this probably helped us a little more than you think it did.
Renee Rude was spitting. She was so mad. Spit was coming up between her teeth. Sue Plash was sitting just like this. And I thought, oh, Joe, you just did me a favor. And of course, he bailed as soon as I got there, But I thought, this couldn't have worked out any better.
On March 1st, 1988, a confident Elk Mound squad boarded the bus and made the 115-mile trip to Prentice. The Prentice gym was small in size, and with a high level of interest in the game, the gym was packed to watch the two top teams in the state go at it for the regional title.
What an experience. I mean, that little gym was packed. I mean, you couldn't got a 3-year-old in there. And it was unbelievably loud, and it was not quiet and loud, quiet. It was constant. And I remember one time out, and I don't remember what part of the game it was, but the kids had their heads right down around me, and I was shouting at the top of my lungs just to be heard because of the noise in that small gym. And I mean, that's what kind of an atmosphere it was. And
it was a great atmosphere and fun to play in, and what a great experience to have. You know, thankful that we're getting reminded of this because we probably had forgotten it. But yeah, just a hum and really trying to focus on each other because you couldn't hear anything else, so you had to really communicate either, you know, eyes or motions and that sort of thing. So it was just a fun game.
Prentice, under the guidance of Hall of Fame coach Joe Foytek, had made 4 state appearances in the past 7 years and was seen as one of the elite small school programs in the state. Led by Heidi Blomberg, the Buccaneers were 21-0 on the season and had no reason to believe that they would not be playing in the field house in 2 weeks. The Mounders relied on their experience of playing Prentice the previous 2 years. Anticipating the matchup since leaving the Gilman gym a year ago, Coach Heimstead left nothing to chance. With the help of Pete Osman, Heimstead gathered as much reconnaissance on the Buccaneers as possible.
you know, if you know Peter Osmond, he scouted it for us a lot, and I think he went up and watched them 3 times. So we thought we pretty much had them pegged as far as what they did and what they wanted to do and so forth.
When I seen them, it was all just I wrote down everything. I wrote down who was left-handed, who was right-handed, who could guard who they played, rotation, when they came in, their size, if they liked to press, if you know, it was almost like a diary of who we played, and we scouted everybody, good, bad, indifferent. He would send me to watch teams that we were going to beat by 30, and he didn't care. You know, I mean, he never got surprised by anybody. But no, they knew me at all the gyms. Threw candy at me at some of them.
Prepared and confident, the Mounders showed they were not about to flinch against the top team in the state. Elk Mound sent the message early that they had come to play, and at the end of the first quarter had surged to a 17-10 lead, leaving the Prentice faithful stunned. As the game unfolded through the middle quarters, a close contest emerged. Elk Mound had its lead trimmed to 4 by the half, but was able to maintain a 6-point lead, 47-41, heading into the final 8 minutes. The Mounders knew the veteran Prentice squad was not going away and were bound to make a run. The girls wasted no time reminding the defending sectional champions that they were not the same team of the past 2 seasons. Playing with poise and determination, the Mounders turned several crucial defensive stops into points and raced out to an 11-point lead with just over 4 minutes to play. A furious rally by Prentice ended with a 3-point bomb that cut the Mounder lead to 1 at the 2:05 mark in the game.
In one of the games earlier, Peter had come back and just offhand mentioned that they had pressed a little bit. But he said it didn't amount to anything. He said it was really passive. So that was a lesson. Don't forget details, because I forgot about it. Well, it was a 1-3-1, and it was extremely passive, and we imploded in front of it. And that's really what made it close at the end.
Prentice had 2 shots to tie or win the game in the final seconds, but when the ball went out of bounds off a Buccaneer player, the game was in hand. The Mounders had slayed their dragon. There was no better example of the team displaying the mental toughness instilled in them by their coach than what they had just accomplished by beating Prentice. Relying on their stellar defense, the Elk Mound girls held the high-powered Buccaneer offense to a mere 38% shooting from the floor for the contest.
I ran into one of the officials from that game several years later, he said to that day that was the best game that he ever officiated. As far as it was clean, you know, it was intense, everything that you want in a game. And that made me feel pretty good.
The 62-60 victory was significant for several reasons. The Mounders secured the program's first regional title in program history. And in the process, not only did they beat the #1 ranked team in the state, they also snapped the Buccaneers' 53-game home court winning streak, dating back to November of 1983. According to the Phillips newspaper, if it was a long time since Prentice lost a home game, it had to be just about an eternity since the Bucs won a whole game without ever holding the lead. In a post-game interview, a conciliatory Joe Foytek said, "Our seniors beat their juniors last year. This year, they settled the score."
There were several players that it was a perfect example of the role players, every one of them doing exactly what they were supposed to do.
With a sense of euphoria still swirling among the players from his signature win at Prentice, Coach Heimsted's task was to get the team focused on the sectional semifinal. Their opponent? No other than conference rival Spring Valley. There would be no surprises between these two teams. Coach Heimsted and Coach Schlieb had great respect for one another and knew this game would be like the others, hard-fought and closely contested. The Mounders, still stinging from the late season defeat at the hands of the Cardinals, which cost them an outright conference championship, had extra incentive in preparing for their opponent. Coach Heimsted knew before the opening tip that the game would most likely be decided by a possession or two. The Mounders carved out a 4-point lead at the end of the first quarter, while Spring Valley struggled containing the Mounders' main scoring threat, Colleen Heimsted. Elk Mound narrowly extended their lead to 5 at the halftime, but even more concerning to Coach Schlieb was that Heimsted had tallied 16 of Elk Mound's 24 points. Schlieb knew that if they were going to have a chance to win, Heimsted could not duplicate her scoring performance from the first half. For the remainder of the game, Valley focused their defensive scheme on stopping Heimsted. To that end, they were successful. The Mounders scoring leader did not score a point in the second half. Complicating the situation for the Mounders was the fact that Heimsted played with foul trouble, picking up her 4th foul early in the third quarter and eventually fouling out of the contest with 6 minutes to play. If there was a person in the gym that evening who thought Elk Mound had reached this level due only to Heimsted's prowess on the court, they were soon to be proven wrong. With their leader out for the game, each player had to shoulder their share of the load and more.
If you know Renee Rude, there is nobody more competitive than Renee. And everybody else picked up their game also, but she was in charge. And I remember Renee telling me after the game, a couple kids coming up to her when Colleen was in foul trouble and saying, you know, what are we going to do now? And I won't give her your exact quote, but her quote was, "You're going to pick, we're going to win, and you're going to help us win." And that's what happened.
Led by Lisa Morris, who nearly duplicated Heimsted's first half performance by scoring all 14 of her points in the second half, including a perfect 8 for 8 from the free throw line, the Mounders showed they were a complete team. When Spring Valley closed to within 3 early in the fourth quarter, Renee Whitinger and Renee Root hit critical baskets to keep the Cardinals at bay. Later in the period, Sue Plosh and Linda Karlstrom hit key free throws to extend the lead to 7. Unlike the previous season when rebounding and free throws led to their demise in the regional final, the Mounders held a 10-rebound advantage on the Cardinals and knocked down 21 of 28 free throws.
When Colleen fouled out, Spring Valley had used all their timeouts in the first half. And it worked. I mean, it slowed our momentum down some. But they didn't have any left. And I remember when Colleen fouled out, Herm was leaning over the bench staring at me like, "Are you going to call one?" And I had. And then all of a sudden I got Linda Carlson's attention. I went, "Don't call it." And that hurt Herm because he couldn't get his kids in to talk to him at all. And our kids just stepped it up. I mean, they just came to play and just really did a nice job.
Ultimately, it was a total team effort that helped the Mounders secure a 53-49 sectional semifinal victory over their arch rival. Coach Heimstead would later state, "This is not a one-person team. I've been saying that all year, but no one believed me. If Colleen goes out or anyone else does, they don't pack it in. They reach down and work that much harder. I was the least surprised person in the gym by their team effort." After 2 intense, hard-fought games against Prentice and Spring Valley, the Mounders were on the doorstep of making their dream a reality.
It's our time. This is our turn, because we watched the boys do it the year before. My brother, Jeff Brendan, Craig Fosh, Thad Schumacher, Craig Kohler, that whole group we watched them go through their season, and I think just wanted that feeling. So I one game at a time, I think, is what we were just focused on at that point in time.
Coming off high-quality performances against 2 excellent opponents, Elk Mound entered the sectional final oozing confidence. Playing Shell Lake at Cumberland, the Mounder Nation had arrived in full force to support the girls in their quest for a state tournament berth. When asked about playing in the sectional final, Coach Heimstead simply responded, "We've been down this road before. They've been in tough games." Harassing the Lakers into 11 first-quarter turnovers, the battle-tested Mounders raced out to a 21-14 lead and never looked back. After Renee Whitinger scored her 10th point of the second quarter, the Mounders' lead had grown to 15. Twice in the second half, Shell Lake closed the lead to single digits, but the game was never in doubt. The statistics didn't lie. The Mounders' stingy defense held Shell Lake to 40% shooting from the floor and forced 26 turnovers, all while winning the battle of the boards and the free throw line. When the buzzer sounded, a jubilant Elk Mound squad celebrated a 65-46 victory.
And I do remember at the end of the game, kind of just looking at my dad and thinking we did it, kind of, I don't know if we shook hands or hugged each other, or, a couple guys grabbed him, I think, but just the elation of our team that we are going to Madison, which you don't ever want that to be your end-all be-all, but it was at that point in time. We were really excited, and again, just to experience that together, and pretty special moment to kind of share with the teammates and my dad.
They had run the gauntlet, winning 5 games in less than 2 weeks. For now, they could take a deep breath and enjoy what they had accomplished before turning their attention towards Madison.
Indescribable. I mean, this is, as a player, I never got there. And my son had got there the year before, and now my daughter's going. And all these kids had worked so hard and done everything asked of them, really. I mean, as far as attitudes and off-season work and the whole thing. It was just like it was fair.
In a state tournament preview article before the team left for Madison, Coach Heimstead noted, "It's all new to us. We don't know what to expect. Everyone is pretty excited." The week of the state tournament was a time for the school and community to honor and celebrate the accomplishments of the team. Before leaving Elk Mound, the girls were sent off with a community pep rally. Even though they were entering uncharted territory, the squad had performed at a high level throughout the season. This was especially true during the playoff run. They were confident and believed the state title would come back with them to Elk Mound the following Sunday. Once in Madison, the team's attention was focused solely on their opponent. Fall Creek is only 30 miles from Elk Mound, but the Crickets and Mounders would do battle on the state's biggest stage to see who would be playing for the state championship. As well as Elk Mound was playing, Fall Creek was playing equally as well. Their high-powered offense, led by Jan Zimmerman and the Crandall sisters, averaged 74 points per game. In addition, Fall Creek held the edge in big game experience, making its 4th straight tournament appearance. Zimmerman, averaging 17.8 points per game, had made the trip to Madison with each of those teams. Nevertheless, Coach Heimstead felt they matched up well against Fall Creek and knew they would rely heavily on their stingy defense to stop the up-tempo game of the Crickets. The state semifinal was played at 11:15 a.m. on Friday, March 11, 1988, at the UW Fieldhouse in Madison. The team was prepared, and if they were nervous, the Mounders did not show it. Coach Heimstead did what he could to keep the team loose. Behind solid play from Heimstead and Morris, Elk Mound found themselves down by 2 at the end of the first quarter. The seesaw affair carried into the second stanza. Renee Whitinger and Sue Plosh helped Heimstead carry the scoring load, combining for 8 points in the period. Down 29-27 going into halftime, Coach Heimstead felt fortunate considering that his daughter had 3 fouls. Fall Creek shot 54% from the floor and had 6 more rebounds than Elk Mound. Coming out of the break, a decision had to be made on whether to sit Colleen and gamble that her teammates could keep the score close against Fall Creek's high-octane offense, or play her in hope she did not pick up a quick foul.
If I knew then what I know now, as far as playing longer and coaching a little bit, I would have probably been a little bit smarter. But I don't think there was any discussion about that. I think it was just one of those things where you have 3, right? Okay, now do what you need to do to try to stay in the game.
No, it didn't occur to me. No, in retrospect, might have been better if I had, but no, I didn't.
He decided on the latter, and when the buzzer sounded to resume the contest, Colleen was on the court. Disaster struck a mere 13 seconds into the quarter. Playing the middle of the 1-3-1 zone, Heimstead was called for a foul as she contested a shot. Coach Heimstead had no choice but to bring her to the bench. This was not the first time that Heimstead's teammates faced the reality of not having their leader on the floor for a substantial amount of time. Foul trouble had plagued her on occasion throughout the season, but time and time again, the unselfish Elk Mound squad had picked up the slack and carried the team to victory. Shortly after Colleen went to the bench, the Crickets carved out a 35-30 lead. Coach Heimstead sensed that this could be a turning point in the game. If the Mounders allowed Fall Creek to extend the margin any further, his team may never recover. She checked back in after only a short time on the bench. Heimstead immediately hit a jumper to bring Elk Mound within 3. It was .2000 in her career.
Oh, actually, I had no idea. I think I remember after the game, either someone said it or it wasn't even until weeks later that I think I saw the picture, and I have that, which is really cool to have. But again, it wasn't something that we focused on, and thank goodness our team hung together in that third quarter and kept us in the game. And again, that was just the theme of this team was who's ever in the game, you've got to do your job. But yeah, the 2000s point, I think now it kind of means something. It didn't really mean anything back then. And actually, I'm a little bit more proud of the 1,000 rebounds, I think is what is kind of interesting to also have kind of in your back pocket. Again, it wasn't something that we advertised. It wasn't something that was talked about. It was just, whatever. You just go through your 4 years of high school and whatever happens, happens.
A short time later, she added free throws, keeping it a 3-point margin. At 1:01 left in the third quarter, and in the midst of a Fall Creek run, Heimstead was called for a reach-in foul on Jan Zimmerman. She had fouled out of the contest with the score 48-36. That was the tipping point. The Mounders continued to play hard, like they always had, but there was no catching the experienced and talented Fall Creek team. Though the 77-52 final margin would suggest a lopsided affair, it was not. For 20 of the 32 minutes, it was a battle between 2 very even teams. There were 9 ties during the game, and were it not for foul trouble and several costly turnovers, the game most likely would have remained tight throughout. Heimstead and Renee Whitinger led the team in scoring, finishing with 16 and 14 points respectively.
After we talk as teammates now, we just remember what we went through as a team, those experiences. We don't remember scores. We don't remember who scored what or who did what. It was just a matter of we had a great season. Like, wow, we we really did something pretty special, and we can reminisce about that. That's what's fun. It's going to be fun to get together and kind of talk about those experiences. But yeah, we realize it more now, and I think we cherish kind of what we had.
We were, I don't know, we were just a fun team. I can't explain it. We understood each other. If somebody was having a bad night, we tried to pick them up, you know.
The journey to Madison for the Mounders was proof that they had earned their spot in the 1988 state tournament field. Few teams in the state could claim they had defeated programs with the level of skilled players that Perennial Powers Prentice and Spring Valley put on the court, let alone accomplish the task on the road within 5 days of one another. Coach Heimsted's team showed resilience, determination, and team play, all characteristics that would make their coach proud. Though the final 1/3 of the game was not how the Mounders wanted the season to end, it did not define who they were as a team. Rightly so, it was the journey that mattered.
But it's something you're never going to forget. It's because it was such a building thing. We really went from, you know, the bottom to the top, building the program. And even though the culmination wants to be winning state, to get to where we got was quite an accomplishment and something I'll never forget.
And I